Hi, quick revision video for A-level business on corporate culture. So corporate culture, very interesting topic. Whenever a group of people are together long enough to sort of form, relationships, that group of people will come up with a culture. It doesn't happen on purpose, but you can see it in a group of friends that you've got. If you've been sort of a group of friends long enough, you start to form sort of values, beliefs, and you start to reward, different behaviours. So, when I was at school, I sort of had some friends who were quite academic and valued academic performance, and then I was also part of the football team, and they valued different things, and there was different, I behaved differently within each group of people because of the norms that had been formed. So, if you have a look around your school canteen and have a look at the different groups of friends, you can sort of identify different cultures that have emerged as a result of those friendships. So, a business does the same thing. A business is a group of people who are together for a while, and on purpose or by accident, the business that those people will form shared values, beliefs, and norms, and that's going to influence how employees behave and interact. So, what do you need to know? You need to know about strong and weak cultures. A strong culture is where the enacted behaviour of individuals matches the stated values of the organisation. So, in other words, if I've got a business and they say that their culture, their values are customer care, they absolutely say their values are customer care. And if they empower their frontline staff who are dealing with customers to deal with any problems, so for example, staff are given the authority to offer a full refund, that would imply that the people will behave in that manner. If, however, they say, "Oh yeah, customer care is our number one thing," but then employees aren't given the authority to deal with customer complaints, they need to get stuff signed off, or perhaps they're motivating people for their output. For example, if it were a car garage, they say the number one aim is customer care, and then if the employees are being paid for how many cars they fix in a week, that sounds fine. But what happens to the incentives? Well, your mechanics will start to offer people repairs that they don't actually need because they're going after that incentive, and that's not good customer care. So the enacted culture is different from the stated one, and that would be a weak culture. You need to know about how culture is formed, and there's more ways than this, but culture often comes from the top of the organisation. There's that old saying, "Do as I say, don't do as I do," but people will generally look to their leaders and they will copy their behaviour. And if they see their leader behaving with integrity, they will tend to follow that. If they see the leader doing things that are questionable, then what example does that set for everybody else? How you reward staff, well, I mentioned, are you paying staff for their output, which encourages you to create a lot of output regardless of the impact on customers, or are you rewarding them in some other way that incentivizes them to behave in the best interest of customers, etc. The stories that are told, what is the Employee of the Month award given for? What do people celebrate? What is celebrated within the organisation? Is it the number of sales that someone makes, or is it do they tell a story about how a customer solved, a client's problems and celebrate that? Why is culture difficult to change? Well, imagine that someone comes into your group of friends and says, at the moment you really value academic performance, but I want you to be really interested in sport. It's going to be very difficult for them to do unless people have that already. Why is that? Because culture tends to get ingrained in people. So say you've got a business where people are arriving constantly late all the time. The leader might be a few minutes late. Everybody is a few minutes late. If you try and change that, it can be very, very difficult to do so. Okay, because people have got into the habit of doing it. So often, to change a culture, you might need to change the leadership. That can often be the quickest way to change a culture. You might need to change the people within the organisation. Certain elements of culture might come from sort of a national culture anyway. So trying to get people to behave in a different way that's completely different to the norms and values that they've grown up with can be very, very difficult. So, for example, in the US and the UK, we tend to be fairly happy with questioning authority, and if something isn't right, we've got a culture that doesn't mind it if people lower down in the sort of hierarchy question people above. In some cultures, that's not very easy to do. So, if I were trying to get, say, a Japanese worker to, question the decisions of the leader or hold them to account, that can be very difficult. Finally, you need to know about Handy's cultural topographies. Obviously, you can look at these, but these are all about where power comes from in the organisation, because who's authorised to make decisions, because that can be a big determinant of organisational culture. So in a power culture, that tends to be quite entrepreneurial, based around a few people who make decisions. Think Steve Jobs at Apple, think Elon Musk, think creative entrepreneur who starts employing a few people around them. That power culture, power hangs with an individual. In a role culture, your ability to make decisions, your ability to hold power comes from your position in the hierarchy. Whereas with the task culture, that's associated with the matrix structure, where you've got people coming together to perform a project or task, and the power in that organisation comes from your knowledge of the particular task. So, for example, a marketing agency, it might be dealing with an airline one week, and you have someone who's dealt with airlines before, so they kind of know the industry. They will take the lead on that project, and then the following week, the advertising agency is running a marketing campaign for Tesco, in which case somebody else might have expertise and they take the lead for that. So task culture very much focused on the project at hand. And finally, a person culture is very individualistic. Individuals in the organisation tend to do their own thing because they're experts in different areas. For example, in a firm of solicitors, you might have someone who's specialised in tax law and a different person who's specialised in probate, dealing with wills and things like that, and they will take the lead there. So that's a quick overview of what you need for corporate culture.